Hello everyone, I'm DanTheMan, and episode 2 of DC Universe All-Star Games was another fun romp. A bit faster paced than the first episode, as well as slightly longer at a bit over 24 minutes, which was a good thing. Granted, they spent almost a minute and a half with the previously on segments in the opening, but even then, with less time setting the game up, we still got a bit more gameplay this episode. First off, the previously on segment, or specifically Alfred the Butler spinning around and saying previously on DC Universe All-Star Games. That was very on brand with this show, as it seemed very reminiscent of what 80s TV shows used to do. I also liked that the Butler actually did something this episode. I didn't mention him last episode because short of Sam introducing him, he didn't actually do anything. Clearly it was a comedic relief type bit having him there, but it was nice to see him justify his existence this time. I also found the bit in the beginning with him giving Freddie, Xavier, and Vanessa a supposed tour funny. The joke didn't land completely for me, as well as likely for most who watch DC Daily, DC Universe's daily news show, as they're clearly in the same studio, right down to the props in the background, which were also used in that show, albeit moved around and lit slightly differently to fit the theme better. I mean, obviously no one was really expected to believe they were in some kind of mansion, it was just a gag. But still, a bit hard to suspend my disbelief on that one. We then get to the game. First off, I like the computer screen graphic they showed as they changed the grades. It said Westward High and showing the grades being changed, but it clearly was something made for the show and not just stock footage of a computer screen, which did make it easier to absorb myself into the story. I want to say again, I really like all the visual aids they use. I've no problem just imagining things, but some fans, especially ones not used to this type of show, might be thrown off if the show was the usual sitting and talking like most RPG shows are set up. So while some of the clips clearly don't entirely align with what Sam is saying, the visual aids are definitely a good thing that they added to the show. If they get more episodes after these 5, I hope they have some extra time and money to make ones more custom made for the story, or maybe even film some footage specifically for the show. So with that, I'm going to take a second to comment on Sam playing Carl's friend Licky, or Lucky, or Licks, or whatever his name is. That was a gross bit, but I won't deny it was kind of funny. Mostly due to the other players' reactions to the whole thing. I don't know if I like it or if I was grossed out by it, but it was memorable. Then, after that entertaining, or gross, or grossly entertaining exchange, we got Katie playing the Dean's answering machine message. And that was the biggest clue of all we've gotten to this show's overall mystery. I didn't give my theories on the clues we got in episode 1, partially because none were much to go on, but also because I tend to avoid trying to deep dive too much into that kind of stuff, because I've discovered that if you do that, you inevitably come up with some theory of what is going on that you fall in love with so much. If it doesn't end up happening exactly like that, you by default reject whatever ends up actually being the answer to said mystery. Plus, if you guess it, then you knew what was going to happen, so it's kind of a lose-lose. But the answer machine message had a lot to unpack, so here's what I gleaned from it. It said, "This message is for the question." I heard that, and the first thing I thought of, and I'm guessing most DC fans thought of, was a superhero The Question. The Question does investigate crime and corruption, so that fits. What doesn't fit is how he would tie into the Dean. Although since it said the message was for the Question, it could mean that the Dean is working with him somehow. I don't know. The time period's right, though, for it to be the Question. The story's set in 1984, and DC had by that time bought the right to all the Charlton Comics characters, including the Question. They technically didn't start using them until 1985, and if we want to get real picky, DC continuity in 1984, he would have been on a different Earth than the Joker, who was referenced in this episode. But still, it's not like DC TV shows are 100% accurate to comic book continuity, so it would still seem that message was most likely referring to the superhero The Question. The reference to the Stingers was emphasized in the message and by Sam Witwer when he repeated it for the players. So clearly it meant something, and I'm sure once it's revealed I'm going to be embarrassed I didn't pick up on it, but I'm drawing a blank on what that would have been referring to, and how it would tie into the Question if he is involved in this. Although I didn't read many stories with the Question, so maybe I'm missing something due to that. I have no idea who the girl's best friend would reference. I guess it could be Katie or Dina. Something was seemingly up with Dina's best friend in the last episode, but I just have a feeling that isn't it. The line Thomas and Martha won't be needing it was obviously referencing the names of Thomas and Martha Wayne, Bruce Wayne, aka Batman's parents, but I'm not sure if that was meant to be using the same names as an Easter egg, or if they were referencing the actual Thomas and Martha Wayne. This is presumably set well into Batman's career, so his parents should be long dead by now, although I guess if they'd been long dead, they wouldn't need whatever he was talking about. I honestly don't know. The address of O'Neill and Adams is clearly referenced to comic book writer Denny O'Neill and artist Neil Adams, both of whom are legends in DC Comics, but one thing that they are best known for is their Batman stories, which help revive Batman into the darker, grittier vigilante he's best known as today. So it fits in with the Batman references we've been getting. So that's my take on the message. Really not sure what to make of it, or how it all fits together, but presumably it'll make more sense later on. While we're talking clues to the mystery, this is probably as good a place as any to mention that the last episode, Dina's best friend had mud on her shoes, and the crew briefly saw a muddy footprint in the Dean's office. Might be too on the nose, but that would seem to imply Clayface somehow is involved in all this. Although I guess it could also just imply that Dina's best friend was in the Dean's office earlier. I don't know. Clearly the two are connected somehow. We got the most excitement of this episode when our heroes had to scale the building to the roof to hide from Dean Finger. The exchange between them as they tried to come up with a strategy to get up and account for a bad roll, almost exposing them, was definitely some entertaining stuff. As was their encounter with the janitor, Mr. Schuster, up on the roof. The name, by the way, is clearly an homage to Joe Shuster, one of the creators of Superman. Also, a clue was that he was afraid of fire. That immediately brought Martian Manhunter to mind. Since he could shape change, he could easily be the janitor, but unless the JLA is staking something out, not sure how he would be involved. Sure, there are other characters afraid of fire, or it might have meant something else. But when you think of DC characters afraid of fire, you think of Martian Manhunter. And while we're on the subject of people not being who they seem, we also got Katie whipping out the bullwhip to help everyone out, both in getting up on the building and on the fight later. The last episode, it was revealed at the end that Katie is not who she pretends to be, and given they went to great lengths not to reveal it to the audience who she was, it's clearly someone DC fans would know. I thought Catwoman last episode due to the thieving thing, but figured that might be too obvious. But now she has a bullwhip, so it seems like she has to be Catwoman. I noticed Clare Grant seemed to be acting a bit more flirty this episode also, which would coincide with her realizing she is actually playing Catwoman, but that might have also been me seeing what I want to see. I never pictured Catwoman as being young enough to pass for a high school student, but hey, maybe this is real early in her career. Although one thing I gotta say about that moment, how did none of the other characters question the bullwhip? I mean, what high school student carries a bullwhip? Did they edit out someone asking about that, or did it really not occur to any of them that their character would definitely wonder what was up with that? We then had the team decide to investigate the message on the machine and find out what the Dean was up to, but getting distracted on their way to go investigate by Tommy's gang, the Wasteoids. Incidentally, I love the figures that stood in for them. The one thing I did find bad about how they did it is they didn't explain the roll for initiative part, which might have confused some non-RPG players. For anyone who doesn't know, rolling for initiative basically means when multiple players are involved in a battle or similar conflict like that, they roll to see who moves in what order. But that might not have been completely obvious to non-RPG players, who might have been confused what was going on. I don't think it killed the enjoyment of watching the fight play out, but the show had done good at being accessible to non-RPG players so far, so I found it kind of bad that they didn't expand on that for people who didn't know what was going on. Although having Sam stop to explain it, especially to people who said that they played RPGs before, so they should clearly know what rolling for initiative is, would have made it come off fake, much like the explanation in the first episode. So maybe it was the right choice, especially since it would have heavily broken up the action on top of everything else. The fight was short but fun, especially Freddie Prinze Jr. having Carl annoy the Wasteoid out of the fight. I wonder what my annoyance skill would be. I hope it's not too high. After defeating the Wasteoids, we get to the end of the episode and found out that this time it was Tommy who is actually not who he seems. Not sure who he actually is. A skilled thief in a gang could be a whole lot of people, but Xavier sure was excited to find out who it was, so I'm guessing it was someone big. It seems clear Carl and Dina will also end up not being who they seem. Likely they'll use one each for cliffhangers in the next 2 episodes. That seems to be the format of this season. Not sure who they could be. The tech skills of Carl is an obvious clue, but I don't know who that could be from the 80s. I tried to think of it, and again, I'll probably be embarrassed when I find out, but I can't think of a tech wizard that was in the comics around 1984. As for Dina, the acrobatic skills seem like a clear clue for her. My first thought was Batgirl, who would be a teenager or college student in this game setting, But if Katie's Catwoman, you'd think Batgirl would have recognized her. Plus, she's the most popular girl in school that has a boyfriend. So how deep of cover would Batgirl have to have been under if this is supposed to be her? So it's probably not Batgirl, but I got no other immediate guesses. There are a lot of acrobats in the DC universe, but that just isn't enough to go on for me to feel I can narrow it down. Feel free to share your theories of who everyone really is in the comments, or your theories on the mystery overall. Whoever they are and whatever is going on, I greatly enjoyed this episode. It was fast-paced and the cast was having even more of a good time than last episode as they grew into their roles more. The episode being so short did seem to be a bit of an issue still. We got a little bit more gameplay this time, but I also felt like there was some bits edited out. I have said this before and will try not to say this every time, but I do hope if we get more episodes, they strongly consider making the next season or the next storyline or however they classify it have longer episodes. Granted, that would be making it more expensive to produce, and I'm sure the show being cheap is the biggest appeal it has to DC Universe, but I think that change would be worth a little bit more money. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to share the video. I'm Dan the Man, and I'll see you next time.